Hi everyone. Hi again from me, Donald Robertson, here in sunny Athens. Although you can't really tell from backdrop behind me. Maybe next time I'll be able to do it from somewhere outdoors or somewhere with a little bit more of a scenic view outside. But I'm here in Athens doing this month's Patreon video to complement the cartoon, which is one of a series about Socrates, and probably one of several about Xanthippe, his wife, or one of his wives. But according to one other ancient author, Socrates had two wives. But generally, the one that we know most about is Xanthippe. And in this cartoon, she's kind of notorious as a shrew. Traditionally, that's how she's been perceived. That's not always consistent in ancient literature, but generally, she's presented as being a troublesome and quick-tempered and argumentative wife. And in the cartoon, the webcomic this month, she is shouting a load of abuse at Socrates, and then she throws some water over him, and Socrates, rather than getting upset by it, freaking out, people are watching and they're like, oh my god, what's going on here? And Socrates dispels the tension by making a joke out of it, and he says, didn't I tell you that Xanthippe's thunder would be followed by rain? Boom, boom. It's like he makes a quip about it. And really, I think the point of this story is, I guess there are several points to it. One of the most obvious ones is that Socrates was known for being very diplomatic in a sense, or very good at dispelling arguments, dispelling tension, and that might not always seem to be the case, but it really, particularly in Plato, so the idea is that the Socratic method is inherently challenging, and that's why he was made to drink hemlock. He pissed off a lot of people by asking too many questions, and he rocked the boat and upset some powerful people, basically. And yeah, at the same time, everything about Socrates is multi-layered and contradictory and paradoxical. That's part of the beauty of the guy, like the individual, the character. But he, on the one hand, went around asking these incredibly provocative questions, like a gadfly, as he puts it in the Apology, kind of like stinging a horse into action, the Athenian state being the horse, the populace of Athens. He's kind of an irritant to them. But at the same time, he was, and I guess had to be, to compensate for that, artfully polite and tactful and really good at diffusing tension and known for this. And we can see many examples of this. We see examples of it in Xenophon's Symposium really clearly, where Socrates diffuses an argument. And that happens in a lot of the Platonic dialogues. It's like often people look like they're about to come to blows, and Socrates kind of smooths it over somehow or other. Often by saying some clever or artful thing, and often he kind of makes a joke that will dispel the tension, or uses humour to kind of dispel tension. Everyone knows that this is a thing that people do today, right? Even to this very day, when there's an argument in a group of people in a bar or a dinner party or something like that, there's often certain individuals that are very good at just making a joke about it and smoothing things over. And Socrates was adept at this. Like it was part of his reputation. So that's partly what's going on here. I nearly lost the other point I was going to throw in there. For those who are interested in Stoicism, Epictetus, of all people, who's obsessed with Socrates, talks about Socrates more than any other author. Epictetus talks about Socrates more than he talks about any other author. One of the things he says about Socrates, again, Epictetus often says these really striking things that you have to kind of read twice and say, did he really just say that? Like, it would be easy just to skim over that. Like, I think people often do that when they're reading the Stoics. They read it without really reading it. He says the most important thing that we learn from Socrates, is his ability at quelling arguments. So you read that and go, yeah, that's interesting. Right? He was telling his students, like, that the main thing they could learn from Socrates was how to dispel arguments between people. And I think that's very significant, and it's very relevant to Stoicism in particular. So there's this one part of it that Socrates is good at smoothing things over, and then there's the other aspect of it, where Socrates isn't surprised by anything, very much like the Stoic sage. He's never shocked. The Stoics very much thought that when people get really upset and angry, they kind of almost feign surprise. So they'll say things like, and to this day, people say things like, I can't believe this is happening to me. How could he do that? How could she say that? I just can't believe this. It's not real. Who would do something like that? Haven't you heard a million times people saying stuff like that when they're upset, right? And have you ever stopped to really think how crazy that is? And that the stuff that they're saying is just completely bogus. How could he have said, because it's the sort of thing that people say all the time. How could this have happened to me? Why me? Why is this happening to me? Because it's the sort of thing that happens to loads of people. I got my wallet stolen. How could somebody do that? Well, people do it all the time. The Stoic sage is more c'est la vie. Wallets get stolen. People betray you and lie to you, and relationships break up, and the Stoics' point is that people don't really learn by observing the common lot of mankind. They thought we're all amazingly naive in that respect, that we see people dying all the time, and getting sick, and being betrayed, and having things stolen from them, all this kind of stuff. And we know that happens in life, but then we act really freaked out when it gets personal. And so, but Socrates didn't. He was just kind of well, yeah, my wife's got a bad temper. It doesn't surprise me that she threw a bucket of water over my head in public. I could have predicted that would happen eventually. And again, the joke is kind of about prediction. It's about forecasting the weather in a way. Like the sage, forecasts that things are going to happen, but they're not. Probably at some point she's going to do this. She's done it before. It's the sort of thing that she does. I'm not going to act surprised when she does it, because that would just amplify the anger or the resentment or whatever. If you want to make yourself really angry, say the kind of stuff that people say when they get angry. So say, I can't believe it, and all that kind of stuff. But what do you mean you can't believe it? That doesn't make any sense at all. It's a ridiculous thing to say. It's just a verbal formula for amplifying anger. In other words, it's actually a piece of rhetoric. It's a use of language that's designed to evoke stronger emotions in a way that plays on our emotions and isn't rational. It's a form of rhetoric that we inflict on ourselves. And so Socrates is kind of aware of that. He's like, well, it's a simple common sense prediction that I made, just like forecasting the weather. Didn't I tell you that Xanthippe's thunder would be followed by rain? Anyone could have guessed that. And and also he's not really bothered by his wife having these temper tantrums. There's a bigger, I was reading the Modern Stoicism monthly Patreon thing. By the way, follow Modern Stoicism in Patreon if you don't already, and support the non-profit as well, supporting me. Who was it had said, I forgot what I was going to say now. I think it was I've lost the thread, sorry, in a video. How embarrassing, but not really. I'm sure it'll come back to me anyway. But so Socrates isn't upset by his. Oh, I remember it. I think it was Massimo or one of the other experts on the panel. Said that, or maybe Greg Sadler said that often with the Stoics, things are kind of taken out of context. On the internet and stuff, and people misinterpret what they're saying. Like that thing in Epictetus where he says that you should say to yourself your child can be dead tomorrow when you're kissing them goodnight, and people think, oh my god, that's an atrocious thing to say. But when you really understand it in the context of Stoic philosophy, it's not, and also Greek history, it's not at all surprising. In fact, it was a cliche that he was uttering, that it was many centuries old. It's attributed to a number of other famous figures, in particular to Xenophon, who the Stoics were inspired by. A similar saying is attributed to Xenophon, Xenophon's son was killed in battle, and the news was brought to him. He reputedly said, "I told you that he was mortal." In other words, a bit like Socrates, he was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, my son was in the army, so like, it doesn't. I knew that he could die at some point. Like, it doesn't. I was prepared for this already." In this kind of matter of fact way. So I guess this is taking what Socrates is doing, going, "Yeah, I knew my wife would throw water at me," and Xenophon taking it to this kind of extreme about, being prepared to hear the news of his own son's death. But this saying that your child is mortal, when Epictetus introduces it, it's clearly derived from this cliched Greek saying that goes all the way back to Xenophon, probably. So things stuff being taken out of context like that seems kind of shocking. You understand it in the bigger picture, it's less shocking. And the thing about Socrates' indifference towards Xanthippe's temper tantrums, there are sometimes you just got to look at the bigger picture in general, and then other times there's kind of like more specific things that people often aren't aware of that you need to add in. So in Xenophon's Memorabilia, for example, there's dialogue with Lamprocles, Socrates' eldest son, where Lamprocles is getting quite annoyed with Xanthippe because she's yelling at him, and he says, how can anyone put up with this woman? My mother's a nightmare. My mum's a head case, she keeps yelling at me and stuff, he's kind of basically saying. And Socrates is kind of like trying to persuade him. What's cool about this is, like, as in some of the other dialogues, Lamprocles kind of isn't having it. He pushes back a little bit against Socrates' argument. So that kind of makes it more interesting because Socrates perseveres. And, part of the context really is and we get this in Diogenes Laertius as well, the story here, if this is like an anecdote or a bunch of anecdotes or stories about Socrates and Xanthippe, the story is that Socrates basically thought Xanthippe was a very good wife and mother, and the temper tantrums that she had were therefore kind of superficial. So it's not that Socrates had this terrible wife and that somehow he was like a kind of abused husband or something like that and just kind of passively putting up with it. On the contrary, it was that he really loved his wife, and that he thought that she was an exceptional mother and a good wife to him, but that occasionally she kind of flipped out and threw water at him when she had a temper tantrum, and maybe he kind of recognised that he provoked her quite a bit. Like, many people have observed that Socrates was probably a difficult guy to live with. Apart from anything else, like, he left his father's workshop in a kind of sort of fairly comfortable middle class lifestyle and began, to adopt the life of a kind of like a beggar, or emulating a beggar or something. Like a poorer lifestyle, a more impoverished lifestyle, which couldn't have gone down that well with his missus. We presume maybe that was one of the reasons that she had these temper tantrums with him. Although there's questions as to really like how poor Socrates actually was. There's a bit of ambiguity about that, but certainly compared to his sort of previous status or his kind of expected status, he was seen as dressing in cheap clothes, like kind of rags, dressing scruffy, dressing down or whatever, and having a small house and things. So maybe she wasn't too chuffed about that. And also to kind of go into a little bit more of the history. So Socrates thought the temper tantrums were superficial. Right? And one of the main themes of Socratic philosophy, one of the big overarching fundamental themes of Socrates, is to learn to distinguish between appearance and reality. He keeps coming back to that. And so that's kind of the key to understanding a lot of the discussions that he's having. And so the thing about Xanthippe, he's like, it's appearance and reality. So the reality is she's a great mother and a great wife, and the appearance is that she's kind of like fiery and bad-tempered and stuff, but it's superficial. Like, it's kind of like these scary masks that the Stoics and Socrates like to refer to, like scary things, upsetting things. It's kind of like they're wearing a Halloween mask or something. You take the mask off, it's not really that scary behind it. Well, he also talks about actors in the Greek tragedies appearing in the dialogue with Lamprocles. Actually, he compares Xanthippe to an actor in a Greek tragedy who kind of appears very ferocious, but it's not real. And he says to Lamprocles, would an actor on the stage be offended or frightened or upset by another actor kind of screaming abuse much worse than Xanthippe does? And Lamprocles says no, because he knows that it's not real. And Socrates says, but you've already admitted that when your mother does it, it's not real. Like, it's just a kind of outburst, she's venting or whatever, it's an appearance and it's not what she actually feels. So therefore, why would you be any more upset with her than an actor would be with another actor yelling like abuse that's not real on a stage? Because you've already admitted like that it's not what your mother really believes and how she really acts. Like, it's just a kind of passing superficial tantrum. Again, what probably confuses modern readers is the idea that maybe the story is supposed to be about someone who's a terrible wife, and it's not. Like, that's not the point of the story. And just as an aside, I guess before I wrap up, maybe mentioned this before, we don't know that much about Xanthippe, but Plato says that Socrates was about 70. I think we believe he was just over or just under 70. I think he was, from some of the comments in Plato, if I remember rightly, at the point of his execution. And so Xanthippe, we're told in the Apology, in the might be in the Crito or the Phaedo, that she's carrying. It's in the Phaedo. It's when she's described as carrying one of the younger children. So that's kind of been taken to imply that she'd recently had a child, and so scholars therefore have speculated that it sounds like she's maybe 30 years or more younger than Socrates. Like, so she was a lot younger than him, which is quite plausible. And then he may have had another wife, and they lived in kind of relative poverty compared to Socrates' previous status. He was came from his father was a stonemason, and Socrates originally was a stonemason, and I think it was implied that he had a brother that was a stonemason as well, which is a kind of respectable middle class profession in ancient Athens. And then he starts to kind of act and live more like a beggar, like I said. So the other wife, the impoverished lifestyle, the kind of asking lots of questions and stuff, the fact that she's much younger than him, these have all kind of added to the picture that there was some scope for tension in their relationship. And the other thing is, there's a couple of things that sort of tenuously maybe scholars have taken as indications that she may have been from a more aristocratic family than Socrates. And one of them is that one of her sons was named after her father or grandfather, if I remember rightly, and that was against Athenian tradition. It would the son would normally be named after someone in the father's family. So scholars have thought there's a slight anomaly there, and one explanation would be if that her family was more prestigious, that she would then have perhaps had a reason to name her son after one of the men in her family. And also her name, Xanthippe, means yellow horse, which I won't digress into here, but there's a pun about that, where Socrates says that living with her is kind of like being like a horse trainer, like working with spirited horses or whatever. But her name is Yellow Horse, which some scholars believe is an aristocratic sounding name, because traditionally it was aristocrats that rode horses. So there's these two kind of tenuous bits of evidence, but maybe in combination, suggestive of the fact that she was a younger woman from a more privileged background than Socrates, who had to put up with the fact that he perhaps took on another wife, and so that may be some of the context for the friction between them, or it might just have been her personality, who knows. Anyway, there are a couple of stories about Xanthippe still to come, I think, hopefully in other cartoons that we're going to be doing, and so I look forward to sharing those with you. Thanks once again for tuning in, and I'll see you next month. So it's bye again from me.